The Phantom Punch, Ali vs. Liston 2, 1965. There are nights when boxing ceases to be only a sport and becomes an enigma. On May 25, 1965 in Lewiston, Maine, Muhammad Ali defended his world heavyweight title for the first time against Sonny Liston. The fight was a rematch since their first encounter had seen Ali, then still known as Cassius Clay, dethrone the man many believed to be invincible. Yet this second duel gave birth to a moment that still haunts the collective memory of the noble art, the infamous Phantom Punch. Barely into the first round, Ali unleashed a short right hand. The blow was so quick it was nearly invisible to the naked eye, and Liston suddenly crumbled to the canvas as if disoriented. The image of his heavy body collapsing has remained etched in history, but the question never ceased to torment fans. Could such a punch really topple a colossus like Sonny Liston, or was it a staged fall? Referee Jersey Joe Walcott, himself a former heavyweight world champion, appeared lost. He hesitated to issue a proper count and was distracted by Ali shouting at Liston to get up. The confusion of that moment is remembered by every witness of that night. Soon after, Liston rose and the fight resumed for a few seconds before Walcott stopped it, declaring Ali the winner by first-round knockout. That decision, taken in total confusion, sealed one of the most controversial episodes in the history of boxing. What followed seemed inevitable. Theories multiplied. Some claimed Liston had taken a dive. Rumors of his ties to organized crime, particularly the mafia, gave weight to the idea he had been paid to go down. Others believed he was simply afraid of Ali, who had become an even more intimidating figure since his conversion to Islam and his fiery rhetoric. A smaller group defended the view that the punch had indeed landed on a vital spot. That night, the iconic image of Ali towering over Liston, his arm extended and his face contorted with rage, was frozen in a photograph. It became one of the most famous images in the history of sport. The consequences were profound. The credibility of the heavyweight championship suffered. Many fans believed the title had been tarnished and no longer represented the pinnacle of boxing, but rather a theater corrupted by invisible forces. Even today, nearly 60 years later, the debate continues to divide fans and historians alike. Felix Trinidad's illegal hand wraps, 2001. When Felix Trinidad stepped into the ring in the early 2000s, he carried the aura of a destroyer. Undefeated and adored in Puerto Rico, he had conquered multiple divisions and established himself as one of the most feared punchers of his generation. Yet on the eve of his highly anticipated fight with Bernard Hopkins in September 2001, an event behind the scenes shook the perception of his career and opened a shadow of doubt that has never disappeared. During the pre-fight ritual, each camp has the right to supervise the opponent's hand wrapping. It was then that Nazim Richardson, one of Hopkins' assistants, noticed something suspicious in the way Trinidad's team prepared his hands. The bandage was wrapped too tightly, with gauze applied to stiffen the fist and adhesive tape placed directly against the skin. This was forbidden because it acted as a hardening layer. In the language of boxing, it meant loading the fists. The gloves effectively became weapons, harder and far more dangerous, almost like plaster. Richardson immediately interrupted the process and demanded everything be redone under official rules. The discovery sent shockwaves. A disturbing question resurfaced. Were Trinidad's spectacular knockouts against durable men like Fernando Vargas or William Joppy the result of natural power or of an illicit advantage hidden in the shadows? Observers began to wonder if years of destruction had been built on a foundation of doubt. Tension rose as Hopkins refused to step into the ring until Trinidad's hands were rewrapped according to the rules. Eventually, the commission forced a new and legal bandaging. The fight that followed took on a different meaning. Hopkins delivered a masterclass, neutralizing Trinidad round after round and dominating in every aspect. In the 12th round, the Puerto Rican was knocked down and stopped for the first time in his career. The hand wrap scandal hung over that defeat, and many believed it proved that Trinidad was never the same without his illicit edge. Some fans even claimed that Hopkins did more than win a fight that night. He revealed the truth about an entire career. In boxing history, Trinidad's hand wraps became a symbol of how cheating can destroy a champion's reputation. The image of a national hero was forever stained by that dark episode. Julio Cesar Chavez versus Pernell Whitaker, the robbery of San Antonio, 1993. On September 10th, 1993, Julio Cesar Chavez entered the ring of the famed Alamodome in San Antonio as a Mexican champion beloved by millions and a living legend. Undefeated after more than 80 professional bouts, he embodied invincibility. Across from him stood Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker, a ringmaster whose reputation was built on evasion, frustration, and the ability to nullify even the most dangerous attackers. The bout was presented as the ultimate test, pitting Whitaker's elusive style against Chavez's relentless aggression. From the opening rounds, Whitaker used his rear hand jab like a spear, striking his opponent's face almost at will. His lateral movement, upper body slips, and distance control turned Chavez's assault into a series of desperate charges. When the Mexican advanced with body hooks, Whitaker slid away, pivoted, and fired back with clean counters. Round after round, the American dominated, not through raw power, but through technical mastery. The crowd, many of whom had come to see Chavez extend his streak, could not ignore the truth unfolding before them. The fight was being fought under Whitaker's rules. After 12 rounds, the statistics were clear. Whitaker had landed nearly twice as many significant punches and had controlled the pace with authority. Many were already calling it the greatest victory of his career. Then came the verdict, a majority draw. There was one judge for Whitaker and the other two scored it a draw. The journalists present were unanimous, for Whitaker had obviously won. The next day's headline screamed about the robbery of San Antonio, describing the decision as one of the greatest injustices in modern sport. The scandal did more than tarnish a single night. It revealed how commercial interests of promoters and broadcasters could overshadow justice. From that moment, Whitaker's name became tied to one of boxing's most infamous injustices. Panama Lewis and the Black Bottle, 1982. Some scandals in boxing history are not about controversial decisions or suspicious punches, but about objects that emerged from the shadows. The most notorious of these unfolded on November 12, 1982 in Miami, when Nicaraguan prodigy Alexis Arguello attempted to capture a fourth world title against super lightweight champion Aaron Pryor. The fight was billed as a summit meeting between two greats, one known for surgical precision, the other for volcanic energy. Yet that night, a seemingly banal scene became one of modern boxing's greatest mysteries. As the rounds wore on, cameras captured a strange moment. In Pryor's corner, his trainer Panama Lewis called out for a particular bottle. Not just any bottle, but the one he had mixed. Moments later, Pryor drank greedily from it, then returned to the ring with renewed fury. The change was immediate. Pryor launched into a barrage of attacks with almost supernatural intensity, battering Arguello until he could no longer withstand the storm. In the 14th round, the Nicaraguan collapsed, broken and unable to rise. The controversy erupted instantly. What had been in the mysterious black bottle? Some claimed it was only water mixed with electrolytes or legal stimulants, but others suspected a far more dangerous concoction, an illegal preparation capable of expanding the lungs and boosting endurance. Pryor's refusal to provide a post-fight urine sample only deepened suspicion. As for Panama Lewis, his reputation was already tarnished by questionable practices, and his flamboyant character cast an even darker shadow over his camp. The scandal shook the sport because it threatened the very fairness of competition. No conclusive proof was ever provided. The Florida Commission, embarrassed, issued no sanction, and the official record simply preserved Pryor's knockout victory. To this day, many still wonder what the outcome would have been without that bottle. James Toney and the steroid scandal, 2005. James Toney was one of those boxers whose talent seemed limitless. He had successfully moved through several weight divisions, from middleweight all the way to heavyweight, without ever losing his mastery of defense and his ability to counterpunch. When he faced John Ruiz in April 2005 for the WBA heavyweight title, many saw it as a historic moment. Toney was not only challenging an established champion, he was representing the art of pure boxing against brute strength. In the ring, he dominated Ruiz with dazzling technical mastery, and by unanimous decision, Toney was crowned heavyweight world champion. Everything seemed perfect until a few weeks later when it was revealed that he had not played by the rules. The anti-doping test showed that James Toney had used anabolic steroids, more precisely stanozolol, a prohibited substance. The announcement hit like a bomb for a boxer of his caliber, who had built his reputation on refined ringcraft and an almost innate sense of combat. The revelation was seen as a betrayal. The issue was not only the act of cheating itself, but also the symbol it carried. The heavyweight division had always been considered the pure and uncontested summit of the sport, that one of its freshly crowned crowned champions had cheated cast doubt on the credibility of the entire system. This scandal went far beyond Tony. It exposed the flaws of a sport where anti-doping surveillance was still too permissive, and where the pressure to remain competitive pushed some athletes to take shortcuts. Tony's triumph had been perceived as a victory of pugilistic art over sheer power. Discovering that he had been aided by banned substances ruined that narrative and turned what should have been a glorious moment into an indelible stain. The consequences were immediate and severe. The WBA stripped Tony of his title, invalidating his victory over John Ruiz. Not only did he lose the belt, but his reputation was shattered. James Toney continued boxing with a few notable fights, yet he was never again regarded with the same admiration. Every performance was viewed with suspicion, and every victory judged through the prism of scandal. For a man who had dedicated his life to boxing, it was a painful downfall. Tyson Fury's nandrolone test, 2015. In 2015, the name of Tyson Fury became entangled in a case that exposed the deep flaws of modern anti-doping control. Though he had not yet become the undisputed champion, the world would discover a few months later, British authorities revealed that a test conducted in February had detected traces of nandrolone in his system, a substance long banned in professional sport. This could have ended his rise and broken the path of a fighter still on his way to glory, yet instead it opened the door to one of the most troubling scandals in recent boxing history. Nandrolone is no minor substance. It is one of the most notorious anabolic steroids, known for promoting muscle growth and recovery. In the history of sport, it has disgraced dozens of athletes. Yet in Fury's case, the affair took an unusual turn. The positive results were known well before his November 2015 fight against Vladimir Klitschko. That duel would decide the heavyweight crown, but the investigation dragged on for months as if the system were in no hurry to reach a conclusion. During that time, Fury was allowed to fight, stun the world, and dethrone Klitschko in one of the most unexpected upsets of the century. The delay in handling the case fueled suspicion. How could an athlete under doping suspicion continue fighting without immediate consequences, especially in a bout of such magnitude for the fate of the heavyweight division? Many saw in it a sign of favoritism or at least complacency from anti-doping authorities, either unable or unwilling to apply the same rigor they had shown to less prominent fighters. It was not until 2017, 2 years after the initial positive test, that UK Anti-Doping UKAD finally announced its ruling. Fury received a retroactive 2-year suspension, which meant he had already served his ban during his period of inactivity caused by mental health struggles and weight gain after his victory over Klitschko. In practice, he was found guilty, yet he lost neither his belts nor his achievements, and his career was able to resume as if nothing had happened. Riddick Bowe trashes the WBC belt, 1992. In 1992, heavyweight boxing stood at a turning point. Riddick Bowe had just captured the WBC world title after an impressive run and was preparing to face Lennox Lewis, the undefeated British Olympic champion. Everything was in place for a clash of titans, but what followed created one of the most memorable scandals in modern boxing history. As contract negotiations dragged on, Bowe made a decision that stunned the boxing world. Instead of signing to face Lewis, he chose to throw the WBC belt in the trash. Literally. Cameras captured the moment as Bowe placed the iconic trophy in a garbage bag and dropped it as if the belt no longer held any value. The act was a provocation against the WBC, against Lewis, and against all the fans who had waited months for the fight. The scandal erupted instantly. Many interpreted it as an attempt to avoid a dangerous opponent, a maneuver that betrayed a fear of risking his reputation. The WBC reacted swiftly yet cautiously. Rather than trying to force Bowe to defend the title, it took a historic decision. The belt was awarded to Lennox Lewis, officially making the British fighter the WBC champion without ever having faced the reigning title holder. For Bowe, the affair had little immediate consequence on his career. He kept his other titles, continued his path, and remained one of the most feared heavyweights of his generation. Just said you're one. Jack Johnson and the Mann Act conviction, 1913. At the beginning of the 20th century, Jack Johnson was more than a boxer. He was a revolution embodied in the ring. The first black heavyweight world champion, he dominated his opponents with insolent confidence and an aggressive style that left his rivals in awe. Yet it was not only his talent that shocked America, it was his freedom to live life as he pleased, his refusal to submit to racist social codes, and his audacity to be seen with white women. In a country still deeply segregated, this simple reality would ignite one of the most most infamous scandals in boxing history. In 1913, Johnson was accused of violating the Mann Act, a federal law intended to forbid the transport of women across state lines for purposes of prostitution or immorality. In the context of the time, the accusation was clearly racially motivated. Johnson was neither a pimp nor a criminal. He had merely traveled with his white partner. Yet the judicial system, backed by a society deeply hostile to the rise of a black man at the summit of world boxing, used the law as a weapon to bring him down. Johnson was sentenced to prison and forced into exile for several years to avoid incarceration. The impact on boxing was immediate and lasting. Not only was the champion prevented from defending his title in regular bouts, but the case sent a chilling message to other black fighters. Talent in the ring would never erase the weight of racism outside it. Promoters, journalists, and commissions were now complicit in a system that refused to let a black man shine at the highest level without social repercussions. Johnson's public image was smeared, and despite his historic sporting feats, he was forced to fight to maintain both his dignity and his career. Johnson's career was never entirely destroyed, yet years of persecution and exile left deep scars. He continued to travel and fight abroad, but the injustice of his conviction weighed heavily on his legacy. Today there is consensus on one point: the Mann Act had been weaponized to suppress a black champion who threatened the racist social order. In 2018, nearly 105 years after his conviction, Jack Johnson was granted a posthumous pardon by the United States government. The gesture, though symbolic, could not restore the lost years or erase the pain and humiliation he endured, but it helped restore his place as a pioneer and an icon who defied segregation with courage and pride. The Jack Johnson affair reminds us today how talent can be crushed by intolerance, yet also how courage can transform a scandal into legend. The Fan Man Incident, Bowe vs. Holyfield 2, 1993. On November 6, 1993, the boxing world watched in anticipation as Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield returned to the ring for their second heavyweight world title clash, a fight that promised to be historic. Fans expected an intense duel driven by Bowe's raw power and Holyfield's refined technique, but absolutely no one was prepared for what was about to happen. An amateur parachutist nicknamed the Fan Man appeared in the night sky above Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas and descended directly into the ring in the middle of a round. When James Miller, the Fan Man, landed during the fight, he brought with him his parachute and a pair of propeller-like fans that created total chaos. The boxers, initially stunned, were forced to halt their momentum. Referees and officials, shocked and overwhelmed, tried to remove the parachutist while protecting both fighters and the crowd. Spectators screamed in disbelief and anger. The scene, at once surreal and dangerous, brutally exposed the flaws in security at major boxing events. The fight was suspended for several minutes as officials worked to drag Miller away from the ring. During this long interruption, the fighters were forced to maintain their focus despite the uproar. Holyfield, always a model of discipline, remained relatively calm, while Bowe looked visibly frustrated by this extreme disruption. The incident was not merely a spectacular interruption, it became a symbol of the risks and lack of preparation surrounding high-profile fights. Eventually, the bout resumed after the delay. Bowe and Holyfield were able to finish their contest, but the image of a parachutist dropping into the ring will remain etched forever in the memory of fans and fighters alike. The Eubank vs. Watson tragedy, 1991. On September 21, 1991, Michael Watson faced Chris Eubank for the British super middleweight title in what was billed as a battle at the very top, but the events of that night went far beyond a simple fight. It became a tragedy that shook the entire boxing community. From the opening rounds, Watson displayed courage and determination, absorbing heavy punches while answering back with precision. Eubank, known for his power and unpredictable style, held nothing back. The fight was intense and evenly matched, but a growing tension filled the air. Punches accumulated, fatigue set in, and the crowd sensed danger. In the 10th round, a series of crushing blows from Eubank sent Watson to the canvas. What followed was a sequence of decisions and delays that would forever change the way boxing viewed safety. After the knockdown, the medical response was both late and inadequate. Officials appeared hesitant and failed to recognize the severity of Watson's condition. He remained unconscious for several minutes before finally being transported to hospital. The absence of clear emergency protocols and the slowness of the response revealed serious deficiencies in how crises were handled in the ring. Images and eyewitness accounts spread quickly through the media and caused a wave of outrage. The British and international boxing communities rose up in criticism of referees, officials, and promoters alike. Michael Watson survived, but the consequences were devastating. Severe brain injuries ended his career and condemned him to a long and difficult rehabilitation. His condition highlighted the urgent need for reform. Calls for stricter medical oversight and faster interventions grew louder throughout the country. That fight became a catalyst for change, showing beyond doubt that the spectacular intensity of boxing could never outweigh the life and health of the athletes. As a result, British commissions implemented new regulations mandating stronger medical presence at ringside, rapid assessment after knockdowns, and referee training for immediate danger. The Watson tragedy was a turning point. It inspired generations of fighters and promoters to treat safety as an absolute priority, permanently reshaping the supervision of professional boxing. Gerald McClellan versus Nigel Benn, 1995. On February 25, 1995, Gerald McClellan faced Nigel Benn at the London Arena in what was promoted as a spectacular showdown between two of the era's most dangerous middleweight and super middleweight fighters. Fans expected a thrilling war, but what they witnessed instead turned into catastrophe. From the very beginning, the fight was a storm of adrenaline. McClellan, renowned for his phenomenal punching power, attacked with relentless aggression. Benn answered with his methodical, precise style, absorbing punishment while responding with controlled violence. The rounds unfolded at a furious pace, and the audience, captivated, did not realize that every passing minute raised the danger for both men. By the 8th round, the drama turned to tragedy. McClellan absorbed a punishing series of blows, and his condition began to deteriorate alarmingly. Many experts and witnesses later argued the fight should have been stopped long before it reached this critical point. The referee, caught in the intensity of the moment and perhaps influenced by the immense commercial pressure, allowed the battle to continue, exposing McClellan to extreme risk. At the end of the round, it became clear that McClellan could no longer defend himself effectively. The brain damage he suffered was severe and demanded immediate medical intervention. He was rushed to hospital, but the consequences were irreversible. Boxing had lost a brilliant fighter at the peak of his career. The incident shocked the world. Media, commissions, and fans united in condemning what many viewed as blatant negligence. The McClellan tragedy became a catalyst for sweeping reforms in boxing safety. The IBHOF and the scandal of belt manipulation. For decades, boxing has been celebrated as a sport of courage and discipline, but behind the spotlight and the glory lies a troubling reality. The systematic manipulation of titles by governing bodies has plagued the sport for years. The WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBO have been accused of selling rankings, creating artificial titles, and protecting fighters who pay significant sums to secure opportunities or championships. This system has distorted how fans and observers perceive the sport. It begins with the very concept of champion in modern boxing. Once the pinnacle of a weight division, titles are now multiplied into categories such as regular champion, interim champion, franchise champion, and other distinctions invented without sporting merit. These belts, often awarded through vague criteria or financial arrangements, have little to do with actual performance inside the ring. For fans, this dilutes the value of a world title and undermines the legitimacy of boxing itself. The accusations are not just theoretical. Documented cases reveal fighters obtaining belts by paying sanctioning fees or benefiting from institutional protection. Some champions were stripped or sidelined to make way for others deemed more profitable to promoters and organizations. The International Boxing Hall of Fame, seen as the guardian of history and integrity, has been criticized for failing to sanction such practices with sufficient severity. The perception of a corrupt sport has grown, particularly among younger fans and the international audience who follow boxing through modern media. These manipulations also impact fighters' careers. A legitimate champion may find himself overshadowed by an official or franchise champion he has never faced. Honest contenders are often denied opportunities or recognition, while others see their names tied to disputed titles. Today, despite attempts at reform, the problem persists. International commissions continue to create new titles to fuel media attention and financial gain. Fans remain divided between admiration for the fighters and distrust of the system. The history of the sport is thus stained by administrative and financial decisions, a reminder that behind every belt lies a complex mixture of politics, money, and power.